Hello there, and welcome to Delightful Dissent. I'm Matthew Belringer, and today the assumption we're going to be getting into and exploring and hopefully challenging is that business isn't personal. And this is a really big one, I think, for me, because it's a really deep assumption in a lot of stuff. And I've heard it a lot of times, and I've also heard it a lot of times to really excuse some very unpleasant behavior, really problematic stuff. And I think it has all sorts of consequences for how we approach work and how we deal with ourselves at work, and actually like really big knock-on life consequences. So I think this is a really interesting one to get into because it kind of touches everything for me. Today's guest, who's going to join me to explore this, is Ben Tucker. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Ben.
That's all right, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. If you're new to Delightful Dissent, this is a show really about challenging assumptions and getting into stuff that might be holding you back. And the reason I do this is because I support social innovation, and I do that by helping radical insiders and unassuming revolutionaries, people kind of changing stuff, really making a difference, but doing so in slightly new ways. And I noticed that from my own experience, and that them too were having all of these problems with these deep assumptions, and that you often have to challenge these to do this work and to change how things work properly. And it's actually quite a difficult thing to do. It's not something we're trained to do, and it's not something we're encouraged to do in many organizations and in many circumstances. So this is a chance, first of all, to get some ideas and see what, here's something that might be affecting you and you can rethink and use in a different way. But perhaps more importantly, it's to give you some ideas about how you might do this yourself and go after some of the assumptions that really matter to you and start exploring this yourself. It's really, and this is an exploratory thing, that we're exploring what's going on here, and it's live and genuinely live. We might talk about some challenging things, there might be difficult topics, and there might be strong language. So just know that that's the case. I really want to give people a sense and, really do it for myself and explore what it is to do this stuff live and to play and explore, rather than having a script and doing it. Because actually that's how it is in real life. This pretend world of recorded stuff is a bit different. And I prefer to do it live and have the energy. And I want you to be able to see that and do that too. And it is about engaging with the messy and grey areas, and it's about engaging and asking questions. So if you've got any questions and you're watching live, then please do ask, and we'll see them and we can bring them in. If you're watching on the recording, do get in touch with either me or Ben, and there'll be the info about how you can do that at the end of the show. So I first met Ben. Actually, he reached out to me on LinkedIn, which is really great. It's not something that happens that often. And for the last year, networking's been really difficult and connecting with people. So I was really pleased just to get a message from someone doing interesting stuff, being like, hey, let's connect and have a chat. And we did. And it was really good. So one of the things about Delightful Dissent is most of the people I ask are surprised to be asked. They don't think that they're doing the stuff, and they don't think that they're working in this way. And I really appreciate people just reaching out and having the conversation, because that's where I find the really interesting work and have really interesting people and kind of get more people to share their ideas and get stuff out there. And when we spoke, we found a really interesting, I thought it was an interesting common background, because those of you who know me and have heard me speak about this stuff, I have a common background in tech, and Ben has a background in advertising. And they're both things that are very powerful and have an awful lot of influence on our lives. And I think both of us saw some of the problems and some of the challenges and didn't want to really be part of that in the same way. I certainly didn't, want to be part of the power and the influence that some of big tech leads. And there was a real interesting stuff to explore there. So I really wanted to get Ben on to share some of his ideas and to explore this a bit better. Could I ask you, Ben, just to, in your own words, give us a quick introduction about the kind of stuff that you do and the kind of people that you like to work with, please?
You can. I really like the phrase, unassuming revolutionary. That's brilliant. Can we just be that? We'll go out there. I want a t-shirt with that on. I make games. I make immersive experiences. My company's Buckbuck Games. It's the thing about Buckbuck Games is about human connection through play. So bringing back play is one thing, but it's all about doing it with humans and humans and humans together, which is something we haven't had for a while. And we've turned a lot of it into Zoom, which is still possible to create a human connection over Zoom, and it's still possible to have fun. So that's what we do. I was 20 years in the ad industry and lecturer in creativity for London College of Communication and BIMM University down here in Brighton and California Polytechnic State University over Zoom. But yeah, I enjoy this dissent. And improv is great fun, so I'm much more comfortable without a script.
It's great, and I really like it. I think I really enjoy it too, and it's a really big challenge for a lot of people. And actually, like playing with it and actually doing it live and in that way, I think is possibly the only way we can kind of share that stuff. It's all very well telling other people they should improvise. A lot of people seem to make a living telling other people they should be doing something without ever really doing it themselves. And this is a great chance to have a play with it. And I think that's really cool and really, you know, it's really important stuff that you're doing, and I really like the getting out there. And for me, I think one of the big things about creativity is I spent a lot of time thinking, oh, I'm not really creative in my job. I don't really, you know, I never identified with being creative. And I think that's a part of the unassuming revolutionary. You know, you are creating something new, you are doing something new, kind of whatever it is that you do, and that intersects with innovation and in really interesting ways for me. And hopefully we'll get into that and talk a bit more about that and the role of play in innovation.
Buzzword in advertising for a long time. It was in my time in the agencies, that was a big old thing. Innovative. Every single brief must be unique and innovative.
Yeah, but not too unique and innovative, which again we'll get into in a bit, I think, hopefully. So yeah, before we get actually into the assumption properly and start exploring this, though, I always like to ask my guests for a quote that kind of, you know, brings a different perspective on things, maybe supports their perspective a little bit, and gives us an angle to get into this stuff. Because, you know, doing Delightful Dissent is not straightforward. It's not necessarily that easy. We're challenging stuff that's out there, and it's nice to get some support. So have you got a quote that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, Matthew, I have a quote. It is it is only one who is thoroughly acquainted with the evils of war that can thoroughly understand the profitable way of carrying it on. Sun Tzu.
It's a really interesting one, and I think Sun Tzu is a very interesting person to quote, because it's one of those things that's often has a lot of different meanings and can be read different ways. So could you tell me how you read it? What do you get from that quote?
I read it both ways. Kind of giving away how many ways there are now. So Sun Tzu's teachings have been carried on throughout business. Lots of business courses base their teachings upon Sun Tzu. And you can draw many parallels from battle, armies, military to business. Uniformity, doing as you're told. I mean, that when it was someone out in a battlefield, there was a certain amount of seriousness that you had to apply, because it was about being killed. And it strikes me that Sun Tzu is a really caring person, because he would say avoid war at all costs. It's a shit thing, so let's not do it. So his tactics and strategies are there to, I don't know, something like he's experienced some real horrible stuff that he wants to be able to minimize that from happening. So it felt like it's like he wrote this out of an urge to help others, which is a very noble one. And now it's interpreted with business with a new importance, a reframed importance, and that business, for some reason, is an acceptable way of of doing what it is he's been teaching about doing, and that, you know, winning the business is winning the war. However, the tactics, as brutal as they can be with killing people, it's like some people, I mean, if they do take it personally, as the subject's about, it's worse than killing them. It's possibly making them kill themselves. So there doesn't, I don't believe there needs to be a parallel. But on the one hand, you could say, hey, look, if you're going to go into business, it's worth you knowing that every fucker is out for each other, and that you will get fucked eventually. Or is it more a case of like, understand it and know it so that you can change it and do something different about it?
I think there's also something with knowing how important, you know, there was an era where almost, I think, many MBAs and many strategy classes teach Sun Tzu, or teach parts of Sun Tzu, I think is probably a better way to put it. And I think knowing that is how people are thinking about what they're doing, even if you don't necessarily agree, is a big part of this. And, you know, how are you dealing with this? It also, what comes up for me is, it reminds me of, there's another similar kind of famous strategy statecraft book, ancient statecraft book, called the Artha Shastra, from northern India, from relatively similar time, slightly later than Sun Tzu. But that has a really interesting idea of war without violence, and how you can do this, how you can go out and, you know, make this change and potentially, you know, do this stuff without violence. You know, if you're committed to non-violent acts, how can you do it? And it feels actually very similar. You know, it's like, okay, this is what needs to be done, and it's unpleasant, but there's a very small amount of that, and actually you're acting to minimize that in the future as well, and avoid, you know, so you don't have to do it again. I think there's something really interesting in that, for me, and this idea of, and if we go into the assumption, you know, business isn't personal, it's a very interesting one to think, you know, that business doesn't have consequences. And it's a strange thing to say, well, okay, business is war, you know, and then it doesn't have consequences. There's an interesting paradox there for me. There's like, okay, exactly as you said, you know, there are big consequences to this kind of, to violence, to these actions.
Yeah. I've got many friends who have been sold a story, which is another part to all this, is well, Sun Tzu says himself, like, the belief of a soldier is more powerful than the actual strength of a soldier. It's like their strength comes from their belief. It's like Moses was led a bunch of people into to fight based on a belief. He actually sold them a story to give them the will, so that, like, when he had the light of God coming down over behind him as he ran down the thing, he just waited for the sun to come up and then attack downhill, which is, you know, you can't lose in that situation. It's great. But it's not, once you apply, okay, no, this is this is not just the sun, this is a great big God, bigger than all of us. And it's going to blind the enemy because we have them on our side. It's like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I'm going to fight for that. That feels great. And so there's a lot of that happens in business, where we buy into a story or an idea of that becomes a belief. And this isn't played down. This is played right up like to the architecture of the building that you're going to work in, to the big the branding, the way that there's all these regiments above, or the idea of there being an above, a hierarchy of sorts, a total sort of decimation of the belief that all humans are born equal. So once we're in that and we're doing it 5 days a week for a long time, and I'd like to say 9 to 5, but it's not, is it really? It's more like 8 to 8. Sometimes weekends too. And you're surrounding yourself with this stuff, and we're very malleable people. We can have our ways turned to be to believe in certain things quite quickly. If you know the blue eyes, brown eyes experiment. What's her name? I can't remember.
No, I can't remember her name off the top of my head either. But
yeah, look up blue eyes, brown eyes. So she takes a bunch of people, puts them in a room, separates blue eyes, brown eyes, and conditions them. Within an hour and a half, they are like screaming unfairness about the whole thing. We do the same in our game, The Hunt for the Smoking Caterpillar, which is our live game. We bring people in, and using all the advertising know-how, actually get these people to follow a certain thing. Even though it's called The Hunt for the Smoking Caterpillar, they all go off on this mad sort of capitalist journey, which is really interesting, how easy it is to switch people like that.
I think that ability to influence people, and I think there's we've got a comment already from that if business isn't personal, why is it presented to us as customers and consumers as such? And I think that's another really interesting paradox here. It's what does personal mean here? It's like it's really about taking on that external meaning. We're expected to, this stuff is pushed so hard onto us, but without any ability to reply, to change the context. So it's like it's personal to us, but it's impersonal to the authority. And I suppose if we go back to the war metaphor, it's like, it's much more personal to the soldier on the front line than it is to the field marshal back at base. The stakes are higher on some level. And I think there's something really, really interesting in that. And the maybe lie is too strong a word, but there's a distortion of the truth about that relationship. With us, it's like, will you matter to, it's like, how much do I matter to you as a brand, you as an organization, you as an employer, versus how much does the stuff that I do matter to me? And there's something being played with, interestingly, there, and in the context, I think, as you're saying, this idea of how much we can be influenced. We're influenced to see it as more of a relationship, more of an equal relationship than perhaps it really is.
Yeah, it's like there's a game that we're all having to believe in, and sometimes it's our own perpetuation of that belief that makes others believe it too. And all it takes, I could cite various friends, I'm not going to say their names, but some of them work in advertising, some of them work for tech companies as well. Actually, it seems like we're on a roll with these two industries, but one of them was promised a different exit to the one that they got. And of course, all it takes is all of the talk, and then at the end, someone to come in, be the numbers person, and go, actually, we've got these experts in, and they, sorry. And I guess, especially now we have a sort of lack of other things to believe in, what with religion going down the poop hole, is like, or various organized religions. Spirituality is obviously like lifting up, which is kind of good. People are finding a belief in a certain something, but with the absence of that, we have work to believe in. We have the belief of productivity itself. I had a friend recently come up, my son's been not doing well in lockdown, has not been very productive. I'm like, what makes you think that they should be productive? Maybe you should question whether productivity is really a good thing. Maybe they're we've got to have something to go in to come out. And if you think of, I don't know, any artist who might be spending years and years, decades maybe, doing nothing other than consuming this thing just to release this one painting or this one invention or song that is the most amazing thing and touches billions of other people around the world. But we never knew that would happen. There's this focus on this constant outgoing without coming.
I think that's a really, really interesting one, and particularly in a business, in a workplace context, and what it means to be creative at work. That's a really difficult question, and this idea that we have these kind of, it's all to a purpose, it's all to a goal, it's all to win the game. It's like, this is the steps that we're taking, and in creating to a specific purpose. And that actually means adapting yourself to the purpose and covering bits up, and kind of masking and being entirely just an agent of this idea and of that's come from outside. And then what you've got to do is kind of integrate that and suppress the bits that are you and the bits that differ, and then just express the one thing and the purpose there. And I think that's something really, really interesting. Is it does depersonalize what we do. Yeah, but that's actually that's quite a very, for me, certainly, as was part of the reason I suffered so much in previous roles, is that depersonalization is a very tiring thing to do. The masking, the being someone else and not expressing that clearly. And it also distorts things for the people that you work with and the clients that you then work with and customers and stuff. So
yeah, we all end up playing the game together, don't we?
we end up wrapping ourselves around each other in the game, and the game, the kind of the pretend game that we've constructed becomes actual reality.
Yeah. That's what we do with our game, with our experiences. We design them so that there is a breaking down of characters, almost like boot camp or school in a way, where we take the players, we strip away what they really were feeling at the time. So it's like, let's all bring down to a level afresh, and then we'll build you up with new rules, new concepts, new ways of being, and then we're going to play. So it's like you are putting on a mask for this game, but it's a fun, different one. So like the Lord's Apprentice is our team game where we have players pitch, do 1 minute pitches to the god of capitalism, who's Lord Sugarplums, who's this deity who sounds very similar to another character. I won't say who, but in that game, they are encouraged to become a candidate on The Apprentice, like to be that arsehole. We have the 3 Ps, and that's passion, power moves, and plum licking. Passion is that you care about this more than anything in your life. Power moves is getting to the top. Chucking others under the bus, taking credit for stuff that's not yours, and plum licking is just loving Lord Sugarplums, agreeing with everything he says. And these are the general sort of things that are encouraged when you're working for someone, is to wear this this bullshit mask, as you say. But when we ask people to act it out in this sort of cartoon hyper scenario with the god of capitalism, and they're doing like these ridiculous tasks, like sending penguins to the moon and stuff like that. It becomes really funny to role play the whole thing out. And in role playing, you can actually discover things, not about yourself, but practice things and decide whether you like them or don't like them. I can't remember. My brain, in terms of referencing things, isn't working at the moment. But someone was mentioning like the kids playing with guns, not real guns, but toy guns. They get to also pretend to die, pretend to go, you got me. Pretend to be the bad guy, pretend to be the good guy. Whatever it is, it's at least then they're role playing, they're trying something, they're learning about what it's like, what feels good, what doesn't feel. Why does it feel bad to be that guy? Oh, right, yeah, they die. It's not ideal. So yeah, I think that's the great thing about playing out these bits rather than playing them out. I mean, to go to a job and play it out for, I don't know, whatever a career is, however long that is, it's maddening, right? Especially if you're not being you.
And I think particularly if it's taking you away from that, and one of my experiences, and something I often speak to people about, is it's actually quite easy, because there's so much pressure and so much noise in all sorts of ways, is to kind of lose sight of that thing within us, the uniqueness and the difference. And I think when we watch kids playing, it's actually really informative. It's because you kind of lose track of that, and it's like, well, you can't entirely know what it is. You can't actually predict that, and you can't know what feels good. I certainly, I've thought that looks like a brilliant thing to do. That looks like a great job. And when you actually get into it, it's like, oh, actually, no, this is horrible. And like,
side of the playground now, just come on, then.
Yeah, exactly. By trying it on, you can see what fits you and what feels good, and how that relates to what you're trying to do, and how that then relates to what happens, and that's a much more flexible and way of dealing with stuff. And I think one of the things about business, as practiced, is hitting on something that works and then just repeating that as efficiently and directly and violently as possible. Just go through the cycle, bigger, more, same thing, but bigger and more. And that has got us quite a lot of stuff. That does actually work as a method in many ways. It is efficient and it drives stuff, but eventually it hits diminishing returns, or eventually it hits an unexpected event, and then it doesn't work anymore. And then what do you do? And I think that question is actually the really interesting one, and that's where the play comes in, and the play and prepares us for that. And in business we call it innovation, but fundamentally it's play. I think that is one of the really important things. Is people talk about innovation, where there's actually very little innovation in business at the moment. We see very little changed. It's more of the same, bigger, but more of the same. To me, maybe that's one side of innovation. That's the efficiency, that's the process innovation. But there's actually doing things differently, asking different questions. And that's a very, very different thing. And I think for me, the most effective way to get there is to play with it and see what happens.
Yeah, that's always been the way we've been asked to do things. Being in the creative industry, I've sort of made products, named them, branded them. It always involves getting out a big piece of paper and playing with different thoughts and perceptions, and challenging those, and putting something in front, like just presenting something in a new light. What did you say the question was? Because I'm surprised someone's asked a question.
So we've got a comment, really, that was about business isn't personal, and why is it presented to us as customers and consumers as personal? Brands being based on personal relationships. I think this is a
drinks. You mean like? Do you mean like the comms?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me it plays out in personal and impersonal at work, and it's actually, as you were saying, that passion for a thing is trying to incite passion in followers is actually quite there's something quite nasty in like getting people to identify with the thing that they don't have any influence over, that can be taken away from them at any time, and that's actually like, so it's a part of you that belongs to someone else. Brilliant. Great. And that can be your shared purpose at work, passion at work. That can be really identifying with the brand. How upset do people get when when stuff changes the color of the packaging? It's because they've been told to do this. I think that and there's a lie here that business is not personal in one direction, but it's acutely personal in another. And that feels like the difficulty. Is it? Yeah, it is personal. We are putting something of ourselves into it, but I'm disconnected in creating it so that there's the space for you to fully meet all of your dreams and needs in this one product or job or whatever it is.
It's made to make money, right? That's the purpose of a business, is to make money. If it doesn't make money, and it's not making money, it's insoluble, right? Which is illegal. Right, so you're not allowed for it to not make money. So it has to keep making profit.
So, I challenge you around purpose, though. I think that's like, it's a necessary requirement for a business to carry on going.
Okay,
to make money.
I'm in asshole mode right now.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're talking. Okay,
it's like, I had a business advisor who goes, Ben, when you see someone with money, get it. And I'm like, fuck's sake. This guy's like on another level. But this is the way that many businesses play this game. It is all about getting money. It is all about getting it as much as you can. And it's obscure, but it's sort of like, if that is the game, if it's about the money side of things, then it's understandable. It's understandable that, yeah, I'm going to pretend that I am passionate and care about this business because they're paying me 75K. But as soon as someone offers 80, I'm going to jump ship and go to the next one. Sorry, mate, it's not personal. We can also play that game. Is there any happiness in it? Is there any happiness in becoming like what the business world is? If businesses are these machines, they need cogs, right? If you become a cog, then of course you're going to pretend to be like, give them all that passion, rah. And then as soon as the pay rise is over there, you're going to go, right, see you later. And that's a part of a move with individualism. Maybe it's causing individualism on a grand scale, but it's no wonder that we're now in this place where we, often if I pick up the phone, there's a robot on the other end. And if it's not a robot, it's someone talking like a robot. And if I go to any, it's the lack of humanity is what makes the most profit, gets the job done. A manager should be getting someone to work as much as possible for as little money as possible. If you're not doing that as a manager, then sorry, you're not a very good manager.
So I wasn't a very good manager on those terms at all.
Not caring so much, feeling like humans. So this is one way of being, and it's a successful way of being. It's gotten a lot of businesses really far. Successful, far. These two words that I'm using are in this sort of game that they are playing. There is another way of playing this game. This cutthroat, fuck 'em sort of like, no, it's all about, business isn't personal. Get on. You have to become a little bit inhumane to be good at that type of business. A psychopathic, apparently, right? Is that the case? I've heard that many.
It does select for certain. I mean, there are a couple of studies. It's difficult because personality typing is complicated anyway, and what psychopathy means is complicated. But there are some studies that have suggested, first of all, that those positions select for some of the more psychopathic traits, that senior leadership positions select for that. And secondly, that over time people become more, they have less empathy as they ascend an organization, so longitudinally. So it's actually something about the experience of, conforming to this situation actually pushes you to reduce the empathy that you already had in order to carry on being successful. I think there's something slightly chilling, actually, for me in that, this idea. I think the idea, if business isn't personal, then why does it change our personality?
It's personal when it suits them.
I think that gets to it, and I think for me, it's like this also plays out with the with the compulsion, with the need to do something, and the conditionality. It's like, you do this in this way and you get the reward. That's kind of the game, and that is kind of the game we're talking about, and it plays out in all sorts of different ways. It's like, you do this, you hit your targets, you get this money.
Yeah,
it's like, and that it's all like, it's all lined up, and it's all conditions and incentives, and what you're doing in that is you're pushing that elsewhere. So what you're doing is you're setting conditions on other people so that they do a thing. You give us this money, we give you the thing.
Yeah,
and then you experience maybe a brief jolt of happiness or something, ultimately, or a brief, your suffering is diminished in some way, and that it's all very conditional. And it needs to be conditional, because that's kind of the house of cards. That's kind of the edifice. We have this chain of like, you do this, and then I do this, and then someone else does this. And it's all about what happens next. It's not about what happens now.
Yes. So this is like E-Myth. Have you read E-Myth, Entrepreneurial Myth?
It's on my bookshelf and I haven't read it yet.
It poses a really good question. It says, imagine your funeral, right? So it's basically, it asks you to work backwards from a point, an ideal work backwards, which a lot of business is based upon forecasting and future seeing. And so imagine your funeral. Who's there? What are they saying about you? What music is playing? Really go into it. Not as a sad thing, but just as a thing of like, okay, if you do have ideals about yourself, this is one way of framing it. And that's really interesting, because you could be the most successful, as in financially successful business person in the world, and you could have fuck all people at your funeral because they all hated you for screwing everyone over, and at last you're dead.
For me, it's like, it's value versus values, and this idea of shareholder value. And I think it's a really interesting one, because if we only measure value in money, we create a really strange circumstance where the kind of rules of the game, the optimization of the game, is just to make as much money as possible. But ultimately, we want money because we can spend it on things. I mean, do we? If we want money because it buys us things, there's no point in being sat on all the money and then not having any functional society around you. If we destroy the planet through acquiring more money, then money doesn't get us what we want. And it's a really slippery thing, this idea. And I always think in terms of values rather than value. It's like, what matters to me? And what are the priorities that I put on it? But that they're always related, because they're always going to be about and enabled by other ones. So even if we just want the most stuff, we actually need a functional society around us that produces stuff.
Yeah.
And our interest in more stuff is not met by reducing the ability of society to give us things that we want.
Yeah. I mean, there's some interesting, like, want is something I'm trying to get rid of altogether. On this sort of, on the spiritual side of things, if you do actually get rid of want, there is an inner peace. There is a sort of like, there's something there that you don't require external stuff. Which is interesting, coming from the advertising background. We're always the people that make these posters or TV ads or radio ads or whatever. And they would be innovative, but they would also be this other word, which is aspirational. And aspirational means better than you. Basically. So
make yourself better. You're not enough. And if you buy this thing, you will be.
Exactly. So once you surround these people or rats or whatever, however you want to think of them, as these, with all these messages that just show better, they feel worse. So therefore, the want is perpetuated and controlled in that way. And I think like a society that's happy isn't an easy one to control, right? And like, it doesn't grow.
Compulsion is a big part of this in all sorts of ways, completely. And I think it's why are we compelled? And also, I think one of the things to consider this is as we're, we have power in this, and both you and I have had power over other people in influencing what they do and how they work and how they relate to stuff. And that's actually a really interesting thing to reflect on for me, because it's not so much like that it's a problem necessarily having power. It's a problem when one person has all the power and another person doesn't. But we want the ability to do things collectively, and that's an important thing. But the question is, like, what are we doing with it? Is it in our interest and is it in other people's? And I think that's a different question entirely to, you know, like, what am I doing with this? And it does play out into this, exactly as you're saying, you know, what do I want? How am I expressing this? How am I meeting my own needs here? How am I meeting other people's needs? And for me, it's about finding the positive intersection point instead of that game where it's like, we'll take everything, take all the stuff, you know, take it from you. As I want to offer you something that you can give freely, and I'm going to be offering you something that I can give freely. And that's a completely different way of thinking about it. But what I can give freely is personal, and what you can give freely is also personal. And so there's an important part about what makes us different, but also what makes us similar enough to have the conversation. But we are different, and being able to play with that and use that to our advantage as well is a huge thing.
With the ability to create communications that can transform opinions or people, let's say call it transformative communications. There's two ways of doing it or intending it. And I would put influence on one side and manipulation on the other. Now, when you're manipulating, you're using that power to try and control somebody, to get them to buy something or to do something or to. When you're influencing, you don't care. You're just doing it for a different reason. It's almost, I would call it, I connect with a creative spirit that I don't have any reason to do something. And sometimes I'll just draw a picture or make a song or sing, just dance out there because it's, because something takes over and I like to connect with that thing rather than the society thing that says don't dance in the street. I like to connect with that spirit that allows that to happen. And the more I disconnect with this thing that doesn't allow it to happen, the more that this thing can take over, this creative spirit. And that with influence, I don't care if someone sees it, but if they do see it, or if they do hear the song, or if they do like the picture, or if they do like the poem or whatever it is, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, when it's created out of just for yourself or for the creative spirit and just for the urge of it, then that's a beautiful, wonderful thing that can influence people. When it's created to manipulate, there's some dark energy about that.
Oh yeah, it always closes down possibility rather than opening it up, I think. And this talking about this stuff, you know, it can be really difficult because my experience of this is I hear a lot of these words and they're actually really important words, but they're kind of bandied about like we know what to do with them. And so for me, I think what would be really helpful is to get into a little bit about how you could actually start doing this yourself or do a bit more of this yourself. I know I shouldn't say start because it is always do a bit more. You're probably doing it already. And it's just about how to consciously do it and be able to intentionally do it rather than it just kind of happening. And for me, there's something very much around what's intrinsically worthwhile and that I can bring people into. So it's that I think one of this business isn't personal thing is the personal stuff, the stuff that really matters to us, isn't somehow there's something in that story that says, well, if it is personal, if it's meaningful to you, if it's intrinsically rewarding rather to do and to express rather than extrinsically rewarding, rather than there's conditions on it, then it isn't worth anything because business isn't personal. And I think for me, actually bringing those two things together is a really, really important thing. It's like, well, what can I do that is part of work, is part of the business, is likely to generate something in terms of sustainable, that I can invite people to, that I can do just because it's fun. And actually this show is an example of that for me. It's great that it gets viewers, and I really love the fact that, it gets these ideas out there. But I would happily have this conversation just with you for an hour because it's really fun and it's an interesting conversation. And that is a different way of working and creating those two things together rather than it being like, well, we have this really cool conversation, when we meet up and then we do a work thing. and they're completely different. That for me is a different thing. So the question I think for me is like, where can you blur the lines? Where can you be playful with the serious stuff?
In the now. A big fan of Eckhart Tolle and just doing stuff in the now. Now, what business does is what we touched upon earlier, is about being in the future. It's like saying, where am I going to be? What are the charts? What are the targets? How are we going to meet these goals? And that just creates stress. And stress or worry clouds creativity. Whereas letting it come and be and happen for whatever reason, and not being clouded, and allowing yourself to come up with shitloads of ideas. One thing I would always teach students is about the metaphor of the what is it? The baby seals. Fuck man, I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna blow you. So there was a documentary where who's the guy who does all the nature stuff?
David Attenborough.
We got a name. We referenced a name, David Attenborough. He so these seals, they'll lay their eggs on the beach, right? And they'll shitloads. Sorry, turtles. That's what they are. Baby turtles.
I was going to
say. This is how messed up. Thank you, by the way, for redirecting my brain to a good place today. It's a good thing. Too much creativity can make it wayward. But okay, so the mother turtle gets pregnant and it climbs its way up to the beach and it lays shitloads of eggs. Then it buries the eggs in the sand and then it goes back out to the sea and swims around. Now these eggs hatch. This is a lovely documentary. Some of them are like scooting off inland. Some of them are getting eaten by predators. Some of them are bumping their head against a lamppost or something. And some of them swim out to sea. Now, I would say to anyone who's creative and has lots of ideas is to not give a fuck like that mama turtle does. It's just to go out there, lay all the eggs, put them out there, not like this, like that, and then go back out and play. Forget about it. And the ones that were meant to come and swim back with you will. And it's that trust in and letting go of these ideas helps not only your state of mind, but your way of when they do come back, you're like, oh shit, yeah, it does work. It really does work. And it's not the way that we're trained to think or be in the traditional business sense.
I think there's something really interesting for me in there. You know, when we're doing things genuinely innovatively and doing stuff is what we learn from it and what we're putting at stake. And this is part of it. You know, I think very often in business, because it's all about that result, you know, we're all tied to that result. If we do anything that might put that specific result at risk, we're putting things, you know, we're risking the whole business, we're risking our income, and that feels like a very dangerous and precarious place to be. And so this idea that we can't take, then we get this idea of, you know, we can't take any kind of creative risks. We can't try anything new. We can't play with it. And this relates also to me with like too busy to play. It's like, I can't, I've got to do this. I've got to do and do and do. There's no time for this. And instead, like carving out a little bit and a tiny bit. I think this is one of the things, because it doesn't really make you more efficient, but it does make your damn site more effective. Eventually, you can find something that works better, just differently, does a different thing that gets you more of what you actually want, and you can do easier. So over time, it's really, really helpful to do this stuff. But in the short term, it actually almost takes you in the other direction. And I think if you think about turtles, you know, go back to the analogy, it's like having eggs costs the mother turtle, you know, like physical energy and stuff. But if she doesn't do that, there aren't any more turtles. So she's got to try it out, and she's got to do it and experiment and like see what works. And also, you know, it's like you can't work out which ones are going to work. You kind of do have to let them. You can maybe have a guess, but there's no like only letting them out the nest when you know they're going to be okay. That's the other thing. Is like when you are creative in work, it's like, well, we can only release this when we're 100% sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. And that is something like we all need to let go. I believe that there's a great deal of positive energy in letting go of the idea that we know the future. No, we don't. We can't. And this sales chart that keeps going up on every single fucking business's board, how is that possible? It's not. So it's there. You can't have company A doing the same as company B, even though they're selling the same product. They're gonna. So it's, and especially now, right? I mean, it's like anyone who's not adaptable and taking each day as it comes, and it's fine to sort of create. I think there's something about that. There's a difference between goals and dreams, and I sort of struggle with this a lot. It's like if there was like a kid who was a singer or a rapper and was like, I want to be like Kanye West. They're going to disappoint themselves, not only because they can become Kanye West, but because they are creating such a forced ideal. It's such a vivid one that it doesn't. I think it was Napoleon said the best laid plans are those that are open to change. It's like it's okay to feel your way, to start rapping, to start finding out a different tune and go down and see it as a thing that develops. But to suddenly go, right, I'm going to hit this target now, you're just going to get annoyed with yourself.
Yeah. I think there's something really profound in that, that idea of trying to be someone else, and perhaps it plays out into the business and the hierarchy, the authority, because you're kind of trying to be them on some level. You're trying to do what matters to them, not what matters to you. I think when we see someone out there, who we admire, we are really identifying with some aspect of ourselves. It's always some aspect of ourselves. The things that piss us off because they're aspects of ourselves, and the things that we admire because they're aspects of ourselves, and we understand why they're valuable to us. So there's a part of you, you look at Kanye West and say, like, well, what is it about him that I'm admiring? What's common between us? What's the resonance? And that then lets you do your own thing as well, because it's the guidance. It's like, well, what do I like from there? What do I like from over here? And how do I be that? And I have a good friend who's Beethoven. She massively admires, I think really values Beethoven. It's like, well, I can't be Beethoven. No. And that's like, well, but you can kind of take the essence of that and express it in your own way, and that's a different thing, I think. And like, so it's not about imitating, but it is about saying, oh, okay, this works for me. I can take some of that and play with it.
Yeah. So I guess as well as being on the end that's putting something out there, to try and do that in an influential way rather than a manipulative way, it's the same when you're receiving something. Let it influence you, but not manipulate you.
Play with it. Does it work?
Play with it, yes. I can see you being a good Kanye West, by the way. I think you'd be great. Apart from, like, you need to work on your twat performance.
Yeah, I don't resonate with the kind of self-belief over everything approach to I can see why it works, and I can see why it works for some people, but it doesn't resonate for me. So that wouldn't be, and that's a great example of why, like, and like pushing some of the limits. And I resonate with that. I resonate with doing something new, and I resonate with annoying some people whilst you do it, but the manner isn't me. And I think that's a different thing. And knowing which bits, that's why it's important. It's like, if I tried to do all of it in the way that someone else did it, I'd just be a bad imitation of them. Whereas if I let go of the worrying about like that specific goal, but being like, okay, I like these bits, so I can play with these bits. They're intrinsically that worthwhile. I don't have to worry about getting to a specific place. And I do like that. I like to wrap this up with what don't people have to worry about anymore? If business isn't personal, if the assumption business isn't personal isn't true anymore, what can people stop doing? What can they stop worrying about?
What can they stop worrying about?
Yeah, we've got so much stuff, with so much compulsion, so much stuff to do. What don't you have to do anymore if business isn't if business actually might be personal? What don't you have to worry about if business might be personal that you were worrying about before?
I guess the future idea, you stop worrying about that. Worry always exists in the future or the past. So unfortunately, business and its communications do play on the futures. Selling a future is what Brexit was all about. It's what there's that great Fire Festival documentary. It's all about selling this future of this amazing that just was a nothing event. So whenever someone says something about the future, I'm a bit like, I just switch off generally. It happens in relationships too. It's like, oh, we're going to be over here. I'm like, it's almost a bit of a switch off anyway, because it's not in the now. I've written something on the front of my book. It says, moment by moment, these things are revealed to us, and some of them are worth making notes of. Even if they only get that far, they have the opportunity to grow, like us. So that's like my mantra that reminds me that it's just like, put it down, let it go, and maybe it will come back. It's not like we don't have to make everything into this ideal scenario. There's a temptation to do it. We're taught at school, man, it's like that 4 + 8, and you're already thinking of the answer, right? You're going like that. And the rigidity of everything must have a solution, everything must equal so-and-so. With the prefrontal cortex that was designed to create this sort of future that sits there in our heads, depending on what we feed into it. To let go of that not only reduces worry, it creates a different way of being for business. And there's a freedom within it. I think a separate conversation to that is auto debt, which is like the bills and the rent and the mortgage or whatever like that. But I know a lot of people are in a situation where they're just fighting to pay that off. But I think that's like a whole different area of.
We talked about, compulsion is a big net of pulls and compulsion, and it does play out in exactly that way. And I think it all relates. This is one of the big challenges of changing anything in this space, and partly why I do this show, and partly why I'm interested in social innovation, is there's no one way we can fix this. There are many ways that will work, and many ways. And I think letting go of that search for the one true way is probably the best thing. It's like, okay, we can play with it. We can figure it out. We can find one way that works for you, one way that works for me, one way that we can do it together if that happens. Brilliant. But that idea that we're looking for that one answer, that solves everything. Life is a lot less tiring when you let go of that as much as, well, for me, it's a journey and something I'm still working on. But it's letting go of the one true answer seems like a really, really helpful way to kind of bring this to an end, I think, as we're reaching the end of time as well. But
let's make mistakes. We all you make them once, right? You make mistakes once. Make all the mistakes once. That's it. It's only a really proper mistake when you make it the second time.
Yeah, absolutely. And even then, circumstances change, I think, and like exploring, but that idea of not worrying about making mistakes so much is a huge one as well. So
teacher would say, let's fuck it up. That's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great attitude to go into things with, and I think it's cool. And exactly as we're still demonstrating exactly what I talk about, that we're doing it in the show. I managed to go over time, so that's not. We're over time, past scheduled time, and we will go over time in terms of the whole thing. So it's a bit of a mistake, but that's fine. That's fine.
I'm to my flat now, as well. Let's go for it.
Yeah. So yeah. So the next thing, I'd like to end this is if people have found this conversation interesting and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out? How can they carry on this conversation or find out more about what you do?
I'm at Buckbuck Games, which is the gaming experience, live gaming experiences, and that's Ben at buckbuckgames.com. Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
We've got a link to the website in the show notes. So yeah.
Yeah. We've got online games at the moment, and we've got live event games coming out as well when that's allowed, which is going to be fun.
When you say online games, you mean like Zoom organized kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
People can interactive stuff. People can play. It's not like a it's all kind of
It's human connection, play through human connection. So we have all these wonderful game hosts who are immersive actors, improvisers, just wonderful people who have this heightened sense of awareness of positive energy. Really it's wonderful people, and it's awareness in itself that makes them so caring and kind, to the point where I can totally trust them to go, there you go, there's a game, here's your customers, go do it. And they are fantastic, really lovely. It's the lovely kind of people, immersive actors, improvisers. If you know any, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I think it's actually really great that you're doing this kind of stuff online at the moment, and it's really challenging, and it can feel certainly like it's a bit more disconnected, but actually all of our work is in that context, and it makes sense to play with that. Makes sense to do that and explore how we can get the best out of that, how we are in that context, as well as being in the kind of workplace. And I think we're going to need more and more of this, and more of this exploratory stuff as we figure out all of the implications of the last year and everything that's happened. So I think it's a really good offer. And is there anything specific that you've got, any offers or anything that you've got for people who want to get into it right now?
So we've just put up 2 ticketed events. The White Rabbit's Hole, which is a fun one for coming up for Easter. We've got a different sort of rabbit for you. It's a Wonderland game. It's like a murder mystery without the murder. Very silly challenges. Many people go into it, into these games a little bit apprehensive. They all come out laughing and wearing stupid stuff on their head, and that's the best thing ever. That is on Saturday the 20th at 8 p.m. There are tickets on Design My Night. So go to Design My Night, look up White Rabbit's Hole. The other thing we're doing is this wonderful guy called David Sands, who's deaf, and he's doing a British Sign Language Big Quiz of Utter Nonsense. The Big Quiz of Utter Nonsense is a quiz that abandons general knowledge. That's all about, it's like a Pictionary, Cranium, Shooting Stars, Cards Against Humanity type stuff, where it's like, here's a thing, now you give us a thing that goes with that thing. And there's no wrong answers, and it's a really lovely thing to see. But David is now doing it in BSL. So we're reaching out. The mission is to bring back playtime through human play, and David's fronting the BSL side of things. And there are tickets for that also on Design My Night, Wednesday, March the 24th and April the 7th.
That's amazing. Cool. I love it. Accessibility is a big theme of my work in general, and I think it's really important, accessible fun as well as like the accessible serious stuff, and it's just as important for exactly the reasons we've been talking about. No, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate you joining us today. It was a really, really fascinating and joyful conversation, and I hope you and the audience have got some interesting stuff out of it as well, and got some questions and stuff to take forward. Do share anything that you've heard here, and share it out and have conversations about it, engage with it, get in touch with us if you want to carry on. You can see this recording and others on the YouTube channel, and also on the podcast, which you can search for is Delightful Dissent on whatever your favorite podcast platform happens to be. The next episode, I'm going to be talking to Carlos Saba, who's one of the founders of the Happy Startup School. And if you've been watching and paying attention and you've looked at some of those past episodes, you know quite a few of my guests are actually Happy Startup School members. So it's good to have him on. And perhaps coincidentally, we're going to be talking about the need to have a clear purpose. You know, this idea and the assumption we're going to be challenging is that you need a clear purpose, which plays really neatly into exactly where we were talking, you know, and that you can explore and you can see what you're actually trying to do before you try and do it. And we're going to be talking about that at 1 p.m. UK time on Thursday, the 18th of March. So, yeah, I think it's one thing when I speak to a lot of people, because I work with people getting started on things as well, and it really holds people back from trying stuff and getting going. You know, this idea that you need to know what your purpose is before you start. It's for me, it's a logical impossibility, but it's such a deep assumption in everything. And so I'm really, really looking forward to getting into this one, so help more people kind of get moving with stuff. So yeah, do join us then. But in the meantime, please, go out and make some delightful dissent of your own. Thanks and goodbye.
Bye.